I still don't know who or what I saw that night. It was just after midnight when I heard the knock at my door. I lived alone in a small apartment, the kind where the walls felt thin and the shadows seemed to stretch too long. At first, I thought it was a prank, maybe one of my friends playing a late-night joke. But then the knocking turned into a steady, insistent thump. I glanced at the clock. 12:15. Who could it be? The building was mostly empty, and I hadn't seen any neighbors lately. My heart raced as I peered through the peephole. There stood a man, disheveled, with wild hair and a vacant stare. He looked straight at the door, unblinking, as if he could see me. I felt a chill wash over me. I had always been told never to open the door to strangers, but something about his demeanor felt urgent, desperate. I took a step back, trying to calm my breathing. "Help me!" he shouted, his voice muffled but frantic. "Please, they're coming for me!" I didn't respond. Instead, I grabbed my phone, contemplating whether to call the police, but the man continued, "You have to believe me! They're right behind me!" I didn't respond. Instead, I grabbed my phone, contemplating whether to call the police, but the man continued, "You have to believe me! They're right behind me!" As I stood frozen, I heard it, a low, guttural growl from the hallway, echoing against the walls. I jumped back from the door, my heart racing. "What do you mean? Who's coming?" I finally managed to ask. He turned slightly, glancing over his shoulder, and I saw a flash of fear in his eyes. "I can't stay here. You need to let me in." I knew I should ignore him, but part of me felt a sickening urge to help. Before I could process it, I opened the door a crack, just enough to speak. "What's going on?" That's when I heard it again. A sound that sent ice through my veins. A series of quick, deliberate footsteps approaching. I swung the door wider, about to ask him inside, but when I looked back, he was gone. Just vanished into thin air. Panic washed over me. I stepped outside into the dim hallway, but it was empty. The growling had stopped, and there was no sign of the man. Just an unsettling silence. I shut the door, locking it tight, convinced I had imagined the whole thing. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have let him in." The hairs on my neck stood up. I looked out the window, hoping for some sign of life in the street below. Instead, I saw shadows flitting by, unnatural and quick, merging into the night. I backed away from the glass, trembling, and suddenly the lights flickered. That's when the knocking returned, louder this time. I felt frozen in place, my mind racing. "Help me!" echoed through the door, but it didn't sound like the same man anymore. It was deeper, more sinister. I stumbled back, desperate to grab my phone and call for help, but the power cut out. The darkness enveloped me, and the only sound I could hear was the relentless knocking, now accompanied by whispers that seemed to crawl along the walls. And then it stopped. Silence. For hours I lay in bed, terrified to move, to breathe too loudly. I finally dared to peek outside. Nothing, no one. Just the empty hallway, as if the whole night had been a nightmare. But I never felt safe again. Sometimes I still hear whispers in the dark. And every time I do, I wonder who or what was really knocking at my door that night.